Talking about, gee, many Christmas, what's going on? We're talking about alcohol and how alcohol works. Last time I told you that when mothers drink, the baby drinks too. That's kind of exciting.
I'm get that first. You said no.
When babies drink, no, that's not it. When mothers drink, babies drink too. So the alcohol gets into the baby's urine, and because it gets into the baby's urine, what the hell is going on? Because it gets into the amniotic fluid, the baby just ingests it over and over and over again. So the baby gets a taste for things, will develop a taste for things. So if your mother ate, I don't know what the world your mother's eating, but if your mother's Italian and she ate a lot of oregano, then you get a taste for oregano. If she's from Mexico, or she eats a lot of jalapenos, then you get a taste for jalapenos. Just the way it works. My ex-wife had a taste for cherry peppers. So now my kids eat cherry peppers by the bucketload. Kids. One's 46 and the other's almost 50. And I'm still calling them kids. Anyway, that's the way it works. So why does alcohol make you, why is it addictive? Most psychoactive drugs affect your brain function and appear to have their effects on the mesocorticolimbic dopamine pathway. It's this strange pathway right here, and it makes you feel good. And if you snort cocaine, or if you smoke marijuana, or if you drink alcohol, whatever you're doing, exactly, or sneeze. It makes you feel good because you get this dopamine rush. People who smoke cigarettes, they get a dopamine spike every time they take a puff of tobacco. If you chew tobacco, it's a constant high. You get this constant high from chewing tobacco. And that's one of the reasons why people dip snuff. If they dip snuff, of course they get this dopamine surge, and it makes them feel good. It makes them feel real good. Chronic drug use produces long-lasting physical modifications in this pathway. Thus, use that was once voluntary becomes compulsive, so you don't have a choice. You need to fulfill that pathway. When we find individuals who want to get off of whatever, if they want to stop drinking alcohol, they want to stop smoking pot, they want to stop snorting cocaine, one of the things, the easiest way for these guys to get off of that stuff is to find another addiction. So unfortunately, a lot of these individuals become chronic gamblers. They'll move on to chronic gambling or something else.
Gain weight?
Chronic eaters, exactly. That's a possibility as well. They get this they get their dopamine surge from eating excessive amounts of food or gambling or whatever it may happen to be. So a lot of times they replace one addiction with another addiction. So the question is, which is the worst addiction? Which is worse? Is it alcoholism worse than gambling? Well, yeah, I guess it's not as destructive. It all depends on whether you win all the time. Of course, we always win, right? Yeah, right. There is a wide variation between racial and ethnic groups in the terms of amounts of substances that they consume. Annual rates of alcohol consumption per person. Almost 19.5 liters of pure alcohol per capita in Uganda. Uganda is right in the middle of Africa. If we look at other African countries, they don't drink nearly as much as they do in Uganda. Why Uganda? Nobody's quite sure. 14.45 liters of pure alcohol equivalent per capita in Ireland. So they drink a lot of alcohol as well. They drink a lot of hard stuff. They don't drink beer, they drink whiskey. I know. Lovely, isn't it? If we compare that to people in the United States, the average person in the United States consumes 8.5 liters of pure alcohol every year. 8.5 liters. A liter is about a quart, a little bit more than a quart. Okay. So 8.5. So that'd be like 2 gallons.
That's it. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
About 2 liters of pure alcohol. In Ecuador, they only drink 1.99 liters of pure alcohol. In some places, they don't drink any alcohol at all. Muslim countries, they don't drink alcohol. They're not supposed to. So their levels are almost zero. Places like Kuwait, Somalia, Bangladesh, and Saudi Arabia. They don't drink hardly any alcohol whatsoever.
That would be to religious purposes.
They're not supposed to. Okay. However, when those people come to the United States, Saudis, Bangla people, or Bangla, Somalians, or Kuwaitis, they tend to drink a little bit, at least more than they did back home. They're not supposed to drink back home. All right. Different social and religious customs and practices encourage and or discourage involvement with particular substances. Oh, he's finally gone. Oh, thank goodness. Way to go, Sheldon. You drove him out. Good job. Okay. Some cultural differences may also be tied to biological and genetic factors. 50% of Japanese, Chinese, and Korean people have a deficiency in an enzyme in their stomach. It's called aldehyde dehydrogenase. It's an enzyme that breaks down alcohol. Because of that, of course, these individuals, when they drink alcohol, they have a different reaction because they don't have hardly any of this aldehyde dehydrogenase. So most of the alcohol goes right into their system. So if you've ever been around somebody who's Japanese or Korean or Chinese, and they were drinking sake if they're Japanese, or they were drinking a beer or whatever, the odd thing is that if you've ever been to Japan, has anybody ever been to Japan? They have beer dispensers on every corner, just like Coke machines. They're beer machines. I know. But of course, it's a very controlled society, so the kids don't drink because they're not supposed to drink. So they don't. It's a very strong collectivist society. Anyway, these individuals, when they drink, their cheeks get cherry red. It's really kind of cool. And they get drunk almost right away. It's really kind of funny. Talk about not being able to hold your liquor. It's really kind of interesting. They also can get sick. And one of the problems is that if they do drink alcohol over a long period of time, their number one killer is not lung cancer. Their number one killer is stomach cancer. So they'll develop a stomach cancer. It won't bother Westerners. It doesn't bother Europeans, certainly, because we have so much alcohol dehydrogenase in our stomach that it breaks down almost immediately. Not all of it, of course. About 20% of it breaks down in your stomach. But as far as the Japanese, the Koreans, and the Chinese are concerned, they don't break down any of it, and they get drunk really fast. And their face turns cherry red. It's really kind of fascinating. Because of the physiological properties on the reward pathways in the brain, many drugs are powerful unconditioned reinforcers. Environmental stimuli associated with drugs take on value as well. So if you live in a society where everybody drinks, or it's cool to drink, then potentially that environmental factor will affect the amount of alcohol that you consume. As I said last time, I grew up in a dry county. It was a dry county in the middle of a relatively dry state. So there wasn't a whole lot of alcohol to be had. I mean, we didn't even think about drinking. The only alcohol we saw were beer cans and whatnot. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know what else would cause stomach cancer?
What causes stomach cancer can be anything. It can be something that's not broken down. It's a toxin that you can't get rid of. It stays on your stomach from stimulating time. Like alcohol, if you don't have the aldehyde dehydrogenase or the alcohol dehydrogenase, then potentially the toxin can stay on your stomach too long. I mean, these toxins we need to get rid of. These poisons, like alcohol, or whatever you're putting in your stomach. So that can cause stomach cancer. It can also cause ulcers. Usually it will cause an ulcer before it causes anything else. We had a guy that came into the emergency room one time. Here I am laughing about this guy bleeding to death. Sorry about that. He came in with a bleeding ulcer in the stomach. He was an alcoholic. And he had gotten to the point where he had burned a hole in his stomach. And now when he drank alcohol, because it would hemorrhage. And so he'd start spitting up blood. So how do you fix that? Well, what we did was we made him swallow ice chips to slow down completely. And then we were pumping blood into him at the same time. He didn't bleed to death, not this time. He bled to death the second time he came in. But this, actually saved his life that time when he came in. Put him in the ICU, kept pumping blood into him. And I was the one that had to cross-match all that blood. We cross-matched every unit in the blood bank. Right there. Anyway, yeah, so any toxin you put in your stomach can cause stomach cancer. What are we talking about? They become discriminative stimuli. Let's not talk about that. That has to do with behavioral modification. Substance use and preference is affected by beliefs and expectancies held by an individual. Alcoholics' beliefs about whether they are drinking alcohol are more associated with the desire for additional drinks than whether, in fact, they are drinking alcohol. They're just thinking about getting their next drink. Let me see if Sarah can. Oh, she's gone. She drove away. Okay. Well, her car started. That's good news.
You're talking about the truck, right?
Her truck started, yeah. Developmental substance-induced disorders, alcohol-induced disorders, amphetamine-induced disorders, caffeine-induced disorders, cannabis-induced disorders, cocaine-induced disorders, hallucinogen-induced disorders, inhalant-induced disorders, nicotine-induced disorders, opioid-induced disorders, phencyclidine, which is PCP-induced disorders, and then the sedative, hypnotic, or anxiolytic-induced disorders. All of these are disorders in the DSM-5, are considered disorders. 2/3 of the people in the United States, at least from time to time, drink beverages that contain alcohol. So 1/3 of the people in the United States don't drink at all, and 2/3 drinks at least sometimes. About 6% of the population are considered alcoholics. So you can look at these statistics and determine whether it's logical or not. When I was up in Montana teaching on the reservation, I would give these statistics and they didn't believe it. They thought everybody drank. And they were right. Everybody in Montana does drink. Except me. I was like the only guy in the whole damn state that didn't drink. And it was a tragedy. But they didn't believe it. They couldn't believe it because everybody they knew drank. And all the white people they knew drank. And all the bars in Harlem and Great Falls and Billings were always packed every night. And people were taking cases of beer home. This was the way it was up in Montana. And they assumed that it was the same way every place in the United States. But they also didn't understand that there were other denominations than Catholics in the United States. About 40% of the population of the United States is Catholic. So what's everybody else? Well, everybody else is something else or nothing else. But they thought everybody was Catholic because in Montana, everybody is Catholic. You understand? So all the people around them, they assumed that everybody around them were typical of all the people in the United States. But the reality is 1/3 of the people in the United States don't drink at all. There you go. So that means that there are people out there who actually don't drink anything. And even of the 2/3, most of them are social drinkers. They don't drink every day. They're not alcoholics. So there you go. As far as heavy drinking is concerned, men outnumber women about 4-1, and that makes sense. All alcoholic beverages contain ethyl alcohol. Also, I will probably call it ethanol or ETOH. This is what we called it in the laboratory, ETOH, ethanol. We were hoping that people were drinking ethanol because this stuff, even though it's a toxin, it's not as toxic as methanol or other alcohols. Other alcohols are more poisonous than ethanol. Ethanol is quickly absorbed in the blood through the lining of the stomach and the intestines. Of course, if you have alcohol dehydrogenase, then you start to break that down. Ethanol is immediately taken into the bloodstream to the central nervous system, where it acts to depress or slow functioning of select neurons. So the first thing it's a depressant. It goes into your system and it starts slowing things down. The neurons in the brain that are bound by the ethanol are the neurons that normally receive the neurotransmitter GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid. Not easy to say. GABA normally inhibits the neurons, and when the ETOH is added, the neurons shut down far more rapidly, relaxing the individual. So normally they would, if this is like sitting down in a chair and all of a sudden going to sleep. If you drink the alcohol, you nod right off, because the neurons that are being affected are the ones that knock you out. So that's exactly what alcohol does. It sedates you to some extent. So if you've ever been around somebody who was drinking, and they were completely sober and then they started drinking, the first thing that probably happened was that they probably started blinking their eyes a little bit, because they were starting to get a little bit sleepy. So they had to fight through that in order to stay awake. The first area of the brain affected by the ethanol is the area that controls judgment and inhibition. Strangely enough, it walks its way back from your prefrontal cortex all the way back to your cerebellum. So it starts anesthetizing you from the front to back. So the first part that goes is the part that should be telling you not to drink any more alcohol. That's the first part to go. And that may be one of the reasons why you can't count the number of beers you've had. How many beers did you have? I worked in the emergency room. How many beers do they always drink? Every time you talk to somebody, how many beers did you have? I had a couple. It's always a couple. They know they had one, and then they know they had another. But then after two, they kind of lost count. So it's always a couple. It's always a couple. This guy could be so snockered, he's vomiting beer. And he only had a couple. Okay, I know, it's so much fun. People become looser, they're more talkative, and they often are more friendly because the area of their brain that usually inhibits them tells them not to talk to people or not to move or not to try to dance. This part has been anesthetized, so their inhibitions go away, as much fun as that is. As their inner control breaks down, they may feel relaxed, they may feel more confident, of course, and they may feel happy, and now they think they can dance, which is always the funniest thing. I would like to go to parties where people actually are drinking. I don't drink, but I'd like to go to parties where they're drinking, but it seems like I always get into a fight. And the reason I get into a fight, it doesn't have anything to do with me. When somebody so after this takes place, remember that reasoning portion of their brain is gone. So they think that now they need to hit somebody or they need to fight somebody. Well, who do they pick up? Travis or me? Which one of us are they going to pick up? I mean, really, who are they going to pick up? They're going to pick on the little guy. Of course they're going to pick on the little guy. So I can't go any place where they're drinking. They're always getting a fight. Of course, drunks don't fight very well. Sometimes they can't hit what they're shooting at or swinging at, which is okay. That's a good thing. But sometimes they do, by mistake. They hit things, whatever they're aiming at. I've been hit with a beer bottle in the head more than you guys can imagine. It's just not right. And I don't drink, so this doesn't seem fair to me at all. So which guy do they pick on? Do they pick on the big guy? No, hell no. They always pick on the little guy. He looks like it's more likely that they'll be able to beat him up. When more ethanol is absorbed, people become less able to make sound judgments, their speech becomes less careful and clear, and their memory becomes weaker. And of course, if you've ever talked to somebody after they've been to a party, they can only remember part of it. Remember, they can't count their beers. So guess what happens with everything else that happened that night? They can barely remember, maybe just a little bit. So their memory becomes weaker. Many people become highly emotional, perhaps loud and aggressive, and these are the guys with the beer bottles that are swinging at my head. Normally they miss, but sometimes they hit, especially if I'm not looking. I've developed eyes in the back of my head, and this is the reason why. A reaction time slows, of course. People may be unsteady when they walk and clumsy in performing even simple activities. So as I said, I've never really lost a fight in a bar, not a bar fight, but I've never lost a fight because these guys are really clumsy. They tend to be really clumsy. unless they get really close to you, and that's what you need to do. You need to stay away from them. So if they swing at you, you can just kind of step back and they kind of fall forward and land on their face and start laughing. Hopefully they start laughing anyway. Their vision becomes blurred, particularly their peripheral vision, and they have trouble hearing. I don't know if you've ever been around two drunks when they were trying to talk to each other. One of them yelling at the other one, and one of them says, "What? Huh? Stop mumbling. Stop mumbling." You know, that kind of thing. The other one repeats what he said. Of course, it's not anywhere close to what he said the first time. It's just kind of a lot of fun. If they don't get aggressive and start trying to throw beer bottles at your head. I've only been hit in the head once with a beer bottle. It only happened the one time. And it was the first time I was ever around drunk people who became aggressive. And they went from happy to aggressive in like 20 seconds. I mean, it was like a switch flip. All of a sudden they were mad. And of course they were mad at me because, well, I'm not very big. Short people make people angry for some reason. I haven't quite figured that one out yet. People who have been drinking have trouble solving simple problems. So the complexity of driving, and driving is not that easy, taking into account their perceptual handicaps, especially the fact all of a sudden they have no peripheral vision. They have all they can see is they have tunnel vision. All of a sudden they have tunnel vision. And so they can't see the sides of the roads. I was reading a book about a guy that was drunk, and he's driving down the road, and every time a leaf blew across the road, he thought it was a deer, because, you know, he's just catching it right in front, and of course he can't do anything about it. So he kept hitting his brakes and stopping for the leaves, as interesting as that is. Anyway, it's difficult for these people to function. I'm laughing about it, but sometimes it's really serious, like when I got hit in the head with a beer bottle. That wasn't funny at all. And it wasn't a 12-ounce beer bottle. It was like a 60-ounce beer bottle. And it was half full. So the guy comes up beside me, and he hits me in the head with a beer bottle, and he like splashes beer all over it. And of course, whose fault was that? It was mine, obviously. I mean, it was my head that it hit, obviously. But I was able to get away from him. He didn't like the way I was driving. Straight.
Maybe Air Force.
I'm sorry?
Maybe Air Force.
This is before I joined the Air Force. Concentration of alcohol in the bloodstream is determined not only by the volume of alcohol that you consume. So what are we doing? We're drinking shots here. If you drink 2 or 3 shots, of course, that's 2 or 3 ounces of alcohol. It's supposed to be anyway, unless they're filling your glass a little bit fuller than it's supposed to be. But the size of the individual has something to do with it as well. So if you're a small person, then you're going to get drunk faster than a large person is. It has to do with muscle mass. It has to do with the amount of body fat that you have. All of these things are factors. If we all decided that we were going to take shots right now, today, right here in this classroom, we would all get drunk faster than we would if it was sunny outside. As interesting as that is. So barometric pressure has a difference. It forces, if it's a cloudy day like this, it will force the alcohol into your system faster. So you get drunk faster on a cloudy day than you do on a sunny day. So there are just tons of different factors that affect the rapidity that you will get drunk. Gender will make a difference as well. Women have less alcohol dehydrogenase in their stomachs, so they can't break down alcohol as readily as men can. Men have more muscle mass. Women have more fat on their bodies. In order for women to ovulate, you have to have fat in your bodies. So the fact that you have more fat, the fact that you have less water in your system, the fact that you have less muscle mass, if you're matching shots with somebody about your size, the probability is that you will get drunk a lot faster than he does if you're a female. If it's a male, you can drink ladies under the table theoretically without much trouble. And it's mainly because of the alcohol dehydrogenase. That and the fact that you have more body fat than they do. They have more muscle mass, which metabolizes alcohol much more readily. So for that reason, gender makes a huge difference as far as trying to drink people under the table. Once upon a time in a land far, far away, with my second wife, we were having a drinking contest, which I thought was kind of strange. But we were having a drinking contest, and she was an alcoholic. I didn't know it at the time. I know. I didn't know it at the time. So here we're matching beers. I don't know. I think I got through 3, and she drank her whole 6-pack. I mean, she drank the whole thing, and she acted like she was drunk. Turns out she wasn't drunk at all. But she was, okay, we won't talk about what happened next, but she acted like she was drunk. That she wasn't drunk. But she had more tolerance than I did. I'm not a very big person. She was about 5'4", weighed maybe 110 pounds. So she should have gotten drunk. She drank the whole 6-pack. Then she started flashing me, which I thought was just exciting as all get out. Of course, I'd had those 3 beers. Oh, man. And now you know why I got married the second time. About 10% of elementary school students admit to some alcohol use. This is elementary school kids, okay? This is kids through the 5th grade. Or is it the 6th grade? I don't know, but it's still, look, 10% of these little bitty guys are drinking alcohol. 51% of high school seniors drink ethanol each month, most to the point of intoxication. 3.5% report drinking ethanol every day. So they drink something every day. Surveys indicate that 10% of all adults in the United States fall into a long-term pattern of alcohol abuse or dependence or alcoholism. The military traditionally, and of course I was in there a lot before you were. Traditionally they drink, and they drank a lot for one reason or another. The Air Force drinks a lot, or used to drink a lot. They don't anymore because, I don't know, they become more family oriented. I don't know if the Army is as family oriented as the Air Force is. Anyway, they used to drink just tons and tons of alcohol. When I was in service, they tried to order me to drink alcohol, which is kind of an odd thing to do. You wouldn't think they would care if I drank, but they wanted me to. They wanted me to drink alcohol. And I didn't. I don't know what's wrong with me. They ordered me to drink alcohol. They ordered me to join the NCO club. In order to join the NCO club, you had to buy 2 drinks a week. That was the rule. That was the old days. That was back in the 70s. And of course I didn't drink, so it didn't make any sense for me to join the NCO club at all. Between 13 to 18% of the nation's adults display patterns of alcoholism at some point in their lives. Men outnumber women 5 to 1, but you guys are catching us. So I congratulate you all on being better alcoholics than you used to be. Things are changing, and women are catching men. The prevalence of alcoholism in any given year is about 7% of the white and African American population, about 9% of the Hispanic population. About half of the Asian population has a deficiency of alcohol dehydrogenase in their stomach, and therefore they have an adverse reaction to alcohol, therefore they are less likely to become alcoholics. As I said before, they're the number one killer for Asians is stomach cancer, not lung cancer like it is in the United States. So they're more likely to drink to excess and die of stomach cancer. Patterns of drinking vary with the individual. People may drink every day to intoxication. This may be what they do at night. I used to live in a blue collar area, and a lot of the factory workers would go home every night. They would buy their case of beer. They'd go home every night, and they would drink as many beers as it took them to get drunk. And then they would stop. And if they had any left over, that was good for tomorrow. Okay. But they would come back. They would come home with their 12-pack. Back then, they only drank. There were no beer cans. Well, there were beer cans, but not very many. Mostly beer bottles. Anyway, so these guys would drink to excess. They may binge drink. This is the pattern of drinking on most Indian reservations, is binge drinking. So they stay sober through the week, and then on Saturday or Friday night, dangerous night to get on the road, Friday night they will start drinking, and they'll drink to excess. They'll drink a lot of alcohol in a short period of time, and that's what binge drinking is. And then they'll stay drunk until Sunday. And then they'll get sober for work on Monday morning. And that's the pattern that they drink. Unfortunately, this binge drinking is the worst pattern for women to drink if they're pregnant. Binge drinking causes FAS because they get a large amount of alcohol at one time, and the baby can't clear that alcohol out of their system. If the woman were a drinker and she drank every day, but she only had a couple drinks every day, of course it would be a different pattern, and the baby would be able to process the alcohol better. But if you binge drink, of course, it puts more alcohol into your system, and of course that is far more destructive for the baby than a constant amount, a lower constant amount. Alcohol intoxication is probably the most well-known effect of consumption. It is a major contributor to death or injury in automobile accidents, violence, and suicide. There are people that are not sensitive to alcohol. They can drink all the alcohol you can imagine. I don't know how much you can imagine, but they can drink a lot of alcohol and not get drunk. It is the most bizarre thing that you have ever seen. Almost everybody, when they drink alcohol, gets drunk. Some people get drunk really fast. I had a student that, when I was in Iowa. She was Romanian, and she could drink everybody under the table. She could drink the whole bar under the table. She was just amazing. Never got drunk. Never ever got drunk. The problem was that those toxins are still in her system. She's not getting drunk. She's not reacting in a drunk manner, but the toxins are still there, and they're still poisoning her. And that's what I tried to tell her. You know, she would go in and she'd be short on cash, so she would go in and she would bet people that she could drink them under the table. She's not very big. She's only about this tall, and she'd drink huge guys under the table, and she'd make a lot of money doing that. It's a good way to make money, I guess. But the toxins were still in her system, and she had to clear all those toxins out. And they told her she needed to be very, very careful as to how much she drank. Level of impairment is related to the blood alcohol concentration, which in turn is determined by the amount of alcohol consumed, the rate of consumption, the body weight of the individual, the gender of the individual, whether you ate food before. If you eat fatty foods, food with fat in it, it will absorb the alcohol. And if it does that, of course, less is going to get into your system. There are just tons and tons of different factors. As I told you, if we drank today, we'd all get drunk almost right away because of the barometric pressure. Most states define legal intoxication as a blood alcohol concentration of 0.08 milligrams per 100 mils, or milligrams percent. How much is that? Well, usually you're just a little bit buzzed at 0.08, depending on how much you normally drink. I have known people that were at 0.25, who didn't act drunk at all. They had such a high tolerance that they didn't have any problem with it at all. We had a guy that this is in the Air Force and in Germany. This guy had a wreck because it was icy and he slipped off the road. So the German police, and it was off base. So the German police stopped him. And of course, they were trying to help him out of the ditch, and they detected alcohol. So they, I don't know if you know anything about the German police, but if they want blood, they get blood, one way or another. They will always get their blood. Anyway, so they drew the blood, and it turned out to be 0.275, or 2.73. I'm sorry. You couldn't tell that this guy had had any drinks at all. As a matter of fact, his wife was a doctor, and she said, if he didn't have any alcohol in his system, he would be non-functional. he has to have that level of alcohol in his system just to be functional. He died about 3 years later of alcohol poisoning. I know, really kind of fun, interesting that individual could tolerate that much alcohol. Blood alcohol concentrations in excess of 0.3 to 0.4 can cause respiratory failure and death in non-tolerant individuals. Fraternity parties, sometimes at these fraternity parties, they just had a death up in Upper New York State at Syracuse University. One of the fraternities, they were making the individuals chug-a-lug tequila. Do I need to explain what chug-a-lug means? It means drinking real fast. Okay. Anyway, they're making them chug-a-lug tequila. Some of these individuals had a really low tolerance for alcohol, and one of the kids actually drank himself to death. I've been in on these cases before. Somebody comes in with alcohol poisoning. There's nothing you can do. I mean, you can pump their stomachs, getting all the alcohol you can get out of their system. But that just takes the alcohol out of their stomach. They're still processing alcohol in their small intestine. And that's that normally is what kills these individuals, is the fact that they have alcohol throughout their system. And all you're taking out is the alcohol in their stomach. And they just keep getting drunker. One of the things we learned in substance abuse is that it takes 60 to 90 minutes before you're at your peak drunk level. And the reason is because it has to be absorbed through your small intestine. So these guys, of course, we're working like the devil to keep these kids alive, but there's nothing you can do. I mean, you can't go into their small intestine and pull the alcohol out. It's just too far down in their digestive system. You can try to dilute the alcohol out by giving them D5W or maybe saline, but there's nothing you can do. You can't give them a shot that keeps the alcohol from getting into their system. There's just nothing you can do. Anyway, and we lost a bunch of them. It was really kind of tragic. And usually it's college kids, and usually it's freshmen, because they're not used to drinking that much alcohol. As a fraternity prank or as an initiation prank, they make them drink a lot of alcohol, and they think it's funny when they start vomiting all over the place or pass out. They think it's humorous. And it is humorous when people pass out. I just thought I'd throw that in. Anyway, I've seen too many cases, unfortunately. Alcohol intoxication delirium is diagnosed for conditions in which consumption of alcohol results in symptoms in excess of normal intoxication, serious enough to warrant clinical attention. Alcohol withdrawal delirium involves similar symptoms of delirium that have onset during withdrawal from alcohol. Of course, delirium tremens is the result. It occurs in less than 10% of strongly dependent individuals during withdrawal, but they all have delirium tremens to some extent, to a minor, maybe a minor extent or a major extent. It really doesn't matter. Delirium tremens is not pink elephants dancing around. Delirium tremens is usually something horrible, whatever they hate the most. Rats, if they're afraid of rats, or insects or spiders or whatever it is that they're afraid of. Usually that's what the delirium tremens is all about, because it is a horror. So they can utilize this. The companies that sell people alcohol can utilize this. Most people in the world, most alcohol is bought not by individuals that have a six-pack every weekend. They don't drink most of the alcohol. It's alcoholics. Alcoholics have to drink large amounts of alcohol in a given day. Otherwise, they get the shakes. Otherwise, they get delirium tremens. So when a company that sells alcohol is trying to sell something to somebody, who are they marketing it to? Are they marketing it to me? Well, I don't drink at all. But are they marketing it to somebody that drinks, a six-pack of beer? No, hell no. They don't buy enough alcohol. They want to hit the guy that has to have that bottle of whiskey every day. That's the guy they try to market it to. And because he has delirium tremens, in their advertisements, they will put pictures of monsters, or they'll put pictures of wolves' heads, or they're in there. It's just really kind of shocking. And most of us don't even recognize it, because if you saw a wolf's head in an ice cube, you'd go, oh look, that looks, it's like looking up at a cloud. Oh look, it's Donald Trump in his hair, Well, that's what we would do, but when they see it, they think, oh my God, that's the way I feel. That's what I see when I'm going through delirium tremens. So they'll go out and buy a bottle of whiskey. That's the way it works. And that's why they sell so much whiskey. They sell it to alcoholics. What's happening here? Oh, the acute phase of DTs usually lasts for 3 to 6 days, and it can cause death. It used to be about 12% of people going through alcohol withdrawals would die from seizures. They would go into seizures. Eventually, they go into a coma, and then they would die. Around 12%. We have lowered it to between 6 to 10% now, especially if they don't try to do it cold turkey at home by themselves. We can help them stay alive. Okay, this is what a brain looks like on alcohol. The guy on the left is the alcoholic. As you can see, there are large openings in his brain. The areas of his brain are not as convoluted as a normal person. You can see how compact this is, how tightly packed everything is. The openings in his brain are not nearly as large as the other individuals. These are a set of twins. This man is an alcoholic. Well, you can see that they look kind of alike. This man is an alcoholic, and this man is not. He doesn't drink. So look at the openings. It hollows your brain out, which is awfully exciting if you think about it. They're not as smart. I know alcoholics think they know everything, but they actually look at their brains. You can see that their brains are less complex than the normal person. So you're much better off not drinking any alcohol. Stimulants are substances that increase the activity of the central nervous system. Alcohol, of course, is not a stimulant. Can act as a stimulant if you've had enough drinks, but it's not a stimulant. Stimulants, the result is increased blood pressure for somebody on stimulants. They have an increased blood pressure and heart rate. They have greater alertness. That's why his eyes are open so wide. They have speeded up behavior and thinking. Amphetamines and cocaine are two widely abused drugs that cause intoxication and overdose, of course. Two commonly used legal stimulants are caffeine and nicotine, which rarely cause intoxication and are almost impossible to overdose on. However, if somebody ever tries to give you concentrated nicotine, it's poison. Do not take it. Don't do it. It's like, how much do you get out of a cigarette? 20 micrograms or something. 200 micrograms will kill you. So you've got that much in your system. So it's like 200 will kill you. And actually, this is a really good way to murder somebody, is injecting. Great, I got it on tape too. And you're going to go and talk to the Homeland Security over the summer. All these people are going to start dying from nicotine poisoning, and you guys are going to know exactly where it came from. Oh man. Anyway, it's a great way to kill somebody because they hardly ever look for it when they do a toxicology. I know, just write that down. How do you get all that nicotine out of it? What you do is you take a pack of cigarettes and you crumble it up in water, and then you just boil it down. That's it. And the stuff that comes off of it is almost pure nicotine. I know, this is exciting, isn't it? I saw it on television on Saturday.
What the? Idiots.
I know. Here I am killing people. Amphetamines are synthetic drugs that act as stimulants. Benzodrine, dexedrine, and methadone are the common forms. It was first developed in the 1930s. My dad drove ammunition trucks up in northern Indiana. They put the ammunition together and then they stored it in southern Indiana. So they had this convoy going constantly. And they wanted him to work a 24-hour shift. So they gave him amphetamines to stay awake at night on the highways. But my dad doesn't like to do those kinds of things, so he drank coffee instead. And he drank, cup after cup after cup of coffee to stay awake. And eventually, of course, he joined the military, and he didn't have to worry about it. During World War II, the Japanese used amphetamines. The Germans used it a lot. The Germans used it just a ton. And if you read any biographies about Hitler, he was almost constantly taking shots of amphetamines and staying awake like all the time. He almost like never went to sleep. It's really nuts. But the Germans had a field method of making this stuff called the Nazi method, and they used to make it right behind the lines. As crazy as that sounds. The Brits used it, the French used it, we used it, the Russians used it, everybody used it. We used to give it to our pilots. I had a friend that flew bomber missions from B-52 missions from Guam to North Vietnam and then all the way back again, of course. Hopefully he came all the way back. Anyway, they would. It was like an 18-hour flight from Guam to North Vietnam. He'd have to refuel a couple times in order to make it, but they would give them amphetamines when they took off, and they either took them or didn't take them. The problem was, let's see, how can I talk about this? Wait a minute. He had acne, okay, and it made his acne worse. So it gave him pimples, as strange as that may seem. So they gave him Accutane. Accutane is a tetracycline. It's an antibiotic. So he used to take the Accutane. But they used Accutane as a prophylactic. Does everybody know what a prophylactic is? It's something that keeps you from getting something. Okay, so it was a prophylactic. They use it as a prophylactic against gonorrhea. So there was a lot of gonorrhea over there. So he used to sell his pills, but he didn't care about his face, I guess. He needed to worry about his face. He wasn't that good looking. Anyway, okay, so amphetamines. We're talking about amphetamines, the Nazi method. They used to make crystal meth in the trenches in Germany. Amphetamines are most often taken as a pill or capsule that can be injected as speed. It can also be synthesized to its crystalline form and smoked as ice or crank. This was a really serious problem that we had up on the Fort Belknap reservation. When I first got there, they were having crank problems. And eventually, of course, we solved that problem. The best way to solve that problem is to arrest all the people selling the crystal meth, and that's what we did. I didn't have anything to do with it. We solved the problem. Don't worry, it's not a problem anymore. Amphetamines increase energy and alertness and lower appetite when taken in small doses. At high doses, it produces a rush, intoxication, and psychosis. You actually become fairly psychotic. Amphetamines act on the central nervous system just like cocaine, and it affects the same neurotransmitters. So all the amphetamines work on the same neurotransmitters. The drug creates a fairly rapid tolerance, and thus more and more is required to give the same high that you had before. Speed freaks often find that they must take dosages 200 times their initial dose to get the same high. This is a lady, 1998, you can see what she looks like. 4 years later on crank, on crystal meth, she looks better. Don't you think she looks better? She's lost weight. She's dyed her hair. Doesn't she look much better in the second picture? What do you think? Her teeth are kind of scraggly, but, well, she's got all those sores on her face, which is always attractive. Speed freaks often find that they must, okay, we already talked about that. 1.5 to 2% of the U.S. population become dependent on amphetamines at some time during their lives. Of course, they had a really serious problem with this up on the reservations in Montana, not just Fort Belknap, of course, but Fort Peck, Blackfeet Reservation, the Flathead Reservation, having a really, really serious time. Of course, they weren't doing anything about it until it got into the white population, and they decided that they needed to do something. The wrong person died, whatever. So they started trying to get people to stop using crystal meth. It's ugly. If you've ever been around somebody who's tweaking, That's what they call it when you're using the drug. They pick at themselves, they're a little nervous, they can't hold their hands still, they pick at their faces a lot. Because it feels like they've got bugs crawling on their faces, so they scratch themselves. So if they get a spot that tickles, they will scratch it until it turns into a really attractive open abscess, which is always a lot of fun. Anyway, there you go. This is real. This is what it looks like. It's not pretty at all. Well, I don't know. She's not too bad looking. What do you think? I like her hair better black, don't you? That orange color is a little off. Amphetamines are potent central nervous system stimulants. They produce increased alertness, wakefulness, euphoria, and ability to concentrate. The DSM-4-TR identifies several amphetamine-induced disorders. Amphetamine intoxication and intoxication delirium. Actually, this hasn't changed from the DSM-4-TR to the DSM-5. Amphetamine withdrawal, amphetamine-induced psychotic mood, anxiety, or sleep disorders, amphetamine-induced sexual dysfunction. One of the things that happens to you if you're using this stuff is that when you first start taking it, it's almost like an aphrodisiac. After a while, you lose your desire to have sex. So they call it amphetamine-induced sexual dysfunction. One of the problems is that these individuals will still try to have sex. And if they do that, they, of course, don't have any feeling. It's not, they lose their ability to get excited. And since that happens, now all of a sudden they become aggressive. They start doing painful things to the other individual. They become sadistic. They tend to become sadistic. And of course, sometimes they will murder their partner. And this is known as amphetamine-induced sexual dysfunction. They'll get so frustrated because they're not able to function sexually. Most complications reported result from chronic consumption. An unusual feature is that cardiovascular system becomes tolerant to large doses rather rapidly, so that the heartbeat and the blood pressure may not be significantly increased in chronic abusers. So you can't check their blood pressure, you can't check their heart rate to determine if they are on amphetamines. Amphetamines, and especially methamphetamines, can cause long-term injury to the brain, including persistent abnormal brain chemistry and psychotic conditions that persist for months or even years. They have a condition that we used to refer to as meth head. Somebody with meth head, it takes them about 18 months for them to recover to the point that they were in before. It takes about 18 months for them to recover, which is kind of unfortunate. So if you're around somebody that is using crystal meth, the probability is that they won't be back to the way that they were before for a year and a half. That's just the way it works. I've had students who use crystal meth. They were okay, but before they started using the crystal meth, they got really stupid when they couldn't remember a damn thing. They were really sensitive to things. I had to change all my PowerPoints because the white light was just too blinding for them. So you put a dark PowerPoint up there with the white letters, and the white is still too bright for them. So I had to change it all to yellow or something subdued or orange. You know, everybody else is kind of squinting at this, and those guys are just going, oh, finally it's not giving me a headache, you know, that kind of thing. Just buggy. Anyway, okay, so a lot of things happen. You get meth head, and it lasts for about 18 months. And you can take that one to the bank. It's like 18 months. 3 semesters. It takes them 3 semesters to get back to where they were before. Caffeine is associated with only 4 substance-induced disorders in the DSM-5. Caffeine intoxication, caffeine-induced anxiety disorder, caffeine-induced sleep disorder, and caffeine withdrawals. More than 80% of adults consumed caffeine during the past year, including me. I had a Mountain Dew this morning. I know. Dude, I had a Mountain Dew. I push Mountain Dew on people from time to time. Marius wanted something with sugar in it the other day, and I gave him a Mountain Dew. Does that make me an enabler? Now Marius, the last time he drove up, he said, I never drank this stuff before, but now I think it tastes really good. And he had like a 36 Code Red, not the red, yellow stuff. It's the red stuff. It's the Code Red. Anyway, I think I've created a monster or something. So we were down in Chinle, and I went to to Bosch's, and of course I bought a 12-pack of Mountain Dew, and he had to have one. He had to have one too. So maybe I've created a monster. His kids don't drink soda at all. That's what he keeps telling me. And now I've got to drink the Code Red. Caffeine withdrawal disorder has been added to the DSM-5. Diagnosis requires that symptoms cause significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or interpersonal functioning. I've talked about this before. My dad used to drink coffee by the bucket load, not the pot, but by the bucket. 5 gallons. He used to drink it, and he never drank it black. He always drank it with cream and a little bit of sugar. But he drank lots and lots of caffeine. Theoretically, he should have been just wired, but he had no problems whatsoever as far as the caffeine was concerned because he wasn't sensitive to it. My mother, on the other hand, could drink a half cup of coffee and she'd start having heart palpitations. We would have to take her into the emergency room because her heart, she was reacting to the caffeine. I have a brother, this is Edison's favorite story. I have a brother that was driving from Muncie, Indiana to Norfolk, Virginia, drank a Mountain Dew to stay awake, ended up in Maine. He blacked out. He's so sensitive to caffeine. So he calls me up on the phone. He says, you gotta watch out for that Mountain Dew. It's really strong stuff. It's really hard stuff, is what he said. And of course, here I am. I'm down in like 6 cans a day. It doesn't affect me whatsoever. So some people are sensitive to it and other people are not very sensitive to it. My brother, like I said, ended up in Maine, didn't have a clue where he was because he blacked out on caffeine. Serious stuff, right? Anyway, that's my family. Cannabis sativa originally came to the United States as the hemp plant. It was imported to make rope for sailing ships. George Washington brought it to the United States. He was going to grow hemp plants. Dude, Washington, Maui Wowie or something, I don't know. Anyway, but he's the one that brought it to the United States. It originally comes from China, so it doesn't have anything to do with the United States. They found it in China. They realized that it was really good for making ropes, so they moved it over to Europe, the hemp plant, of course. At this point, nobody really understood that it had any intoxicants in it, and the reality is it only has mild intoxicants. Cannabis is used in 2 basic forms. It's either smoked, you either smoke the plant, you crush it, you dry it, and you smoke it. This is known as marijuana. You can also take the resin, which has a lot of THC in it, and you can smoke the resin, and this is known as hashish. So if you go to Europe, there are certain places in Europe where you can get hashish legally, Amsterdam, for example, but it's the resin. They don't smoke marijuana over there, they smoke hashish. Hashish is created, I already talked about that. Actually, it comes out of the female plant. The active ingredient that causes intoxication is delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. There are other substances in it. There is one substance called CBD, which has medicinal properties that people are arguing we need to let everybody smoke pot in order to get the CBD. How much CBD do you get? Well, it all depends on the plant. When smoked, marijuana produces a mixture of hallucinogenic, depressive, and stimulant effects. Many smokers report sharpened perceptions and fascinations with intensified sounds and sights. Smokers experience feelings of joy, relaxation, and they may become quiet or they may become talkative. Physical changes include reddening of the eyes due to vasodilation in the area. This guy came to my house the other day. He wanted to borrow some money. He came to my house and he said, oh, the wind's blowing really hard. Of course, the wind was hardly blowing at all. He said, that's why my eyes are so red. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's why your eyes are so red. It's because of all the allergens in the air. Anyway, and he was kind of hiding his eyes and kind of winking. He wanted me to see how red his eyes were. It increases your heartbeat, it increases your blood pressure, it increases your appetites, it causes dryness in the mouth, it gives you time distortion, and it makes you dizzy. I was talking to Dr. Wolf. She said the last time she went to Cortez, of course marijuana is legal in Colorado. She said the last time she went to Cortez, she just about went nuts because people were driving so slow. It just drove her crazy. She couldn't get from one place to the other because these people were driving so ridiculously slow. I thought that was funny. I got called out one time. Of course, I was working in the emergency room. They needed some blood drawn on some guy, and of course he's dying. And they called me up on the phone, and I threw my kids in the car, jumped in the car. I had to drive through base housing in order to get to the hospital. And right in front of me, the X-ray tech pulled out right in front of me. And I'm thinking, okay, that's fine. He got called out too. And so we'll get there because, well, we both need to get there really fast. He drove 5 miles an hour in a 20-mile-an-hour zone. I could have walked to the hospital faster. But of course I couldn't because I had my kids, so I couldn't get out of the car. And I got to the hospital, and of course they just reamed us up one side and down the other. If this guy dies, it's all your fault, all that kind of stuff. Like I haven't killed people before. Anyway, so I went to the X-ray tech and I said, why were you driving so slow? Were you stoned? And I looked him in the eyes, and his eyes were so red. He really was stoned. That's why he was driving so slow. Anyway, the rest of it's a really sad story. He put out a hit on me because he thought I was going to turn him in. Oh man! And so here I am ducking people for the next 6 months because they wanted to kill me. I didn't turn him in. And I didn't get killed, so that's good news as well. While marijuana is probably not physically addictive, use can cause immediate apathy that, if perpetuated through frequent use, can cause years of wasted time where nothing else is accomplished except daily marijuana use. I have a friend who came back from Vietnam with a habit. His habit was smoking pot. Actually, his habit was worse in Vietnam. And when he came back, he started living in the basement, his mother's basement. And he didn't move out until his mother moved out. She moved to the nursing home and he moved to an apartment. It was really kind of interesting going down to visit him because he had aluminum foil all over the windows for some unknown reason. I couldn't figure that out. Anyway, it was really kind of strange. Even to this day, he's still alive. He's 68 years old. But that's all he does is look for marijuana every day. That's it. He has no other desires to do anything. Of course, this is the guy that had 3 women pregnant at the same time. His girlfriend, his wife, and his ex-wife were all, he impregnated them within a week of one another. I know, he's such a stud. It's a good thing because we're going to talk about what is the probability of being able to reproduce if you smoke a lot of pot. Between 4 to 5% of the U.S. population becomes dependent on marijuana sometime in their lives. The strength of marijuana itself has increased since the 1960s. The new hybrids and special growing conditions have increased the amount of THC in marijuana from between 1 to 5%. 1 to 5%. This is all the THC that was in the marijuana back in the day. And the day, of course, is the 60s and 70s. To 10 to 15% today. It's 15 times stronger than it used to be. I was talking to Dr. Wolf, and she was saying that somebody told her that they're growing a form of marijuana in Snowflake, right down the road. That's where Marius is from. In Snowflake, that they call, I can't remember. Anyway, it's It's heroin pot is what it is, and it's really, really strong. It's got a lot of THC in it. What did he call it? She called it something. Because marijuana can interfere with the performance of complex sensory motor tasks and with cognitive functions, it has been implicated in many automobile accidents, but we don't know how much marijuana causes what kind of problems. Short-term memory tends to be drastically impaired, especially for the 3 to 6 hours that you're stoned. You can't remember from 1 second to the next, or 1 minute to the next. Marijuana contains 80 ingredients that could be considered carcinogenic. Marijuana affects reproduction by lowering your testosterone level, decreasing your sperm count, and causing abnormal forms. We have found as much as 70% abnormal forms in sperm counts of individuals that smoke marijuana chronically. 70%. Now normally when a male produces sperm and he produces a semen specimen, he'll have maybe 10% abnormal forms. Well, we found as much as 70% abnormal forms in somebody who's a chronic marijuana user. As painful as that is. High school marijuana usage, but you can't use it as to keep yourself from getting pregnant. It doesn't work that way. You never know. You may get one of these abnormal forms that has fertilized the egg, and now we got a really serious problem. High school marijuana usage was as high as 11% in 1978. Today it is around 6%, so as you can see, the usage has actually gone down. It's legal in Canada. It's legal in New Zealand. It's decriminalized in Australia. So we get really good research coming out of those 3 countries, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada. So if you read any research coming out of Canada, it's probably pretty good research. They decriminalized it about 25 years ago. They legalized it in New Zealand about 25 years ago. Recently they finished a longitudinal study down in New Zealand that was 25 years long, and they were looking at individuals that smoked marijuana. What they discovered was that if they started smoking marijuana before the age of 12, the individual lost 10 to 20 IQ points. And of course, who's got 10 to 20 points to lose? I certainly, that would make me an idiot. So that would be the dumbest thing I ever did. DSM-5 substance-induced disorders related to cannabis use, cannabis intoxication, intoxication delirium, cannabis-induced psychotic disorder, cannabis-induced anxiety disorder, and cannabis-induced sleep disorder. So how do you act when you're stoned? Well, however you act when you're stoned, the opposite is the way you act when you're not stoned. So if it makes you feel happy when you're stoned, guess what happens when you're not stoned? If everything is interesting to you when you're stoned, nothing is interesting to you when you're not stoned. As odd as that, that's not that odd, is it? Yeah, you get the opposite effect. Of course you do. If you've ever been around somebody that smokes a lot of pot, and they haven't smoked in the last day or so, a lot of times they're just bored out of their gourd. Video games ain't no fun no more. This is the most boring game I've ever played. Jeez, here I am shooting zombies in the head. And of course, the day before, they're going, oh man, did you see that zombie's head explode? That's great. Anyway, evidently you've got different friends than I do. Cannabis is the most widely used illicit drug in the United States, even with 10 states legalizing marijuana. Lifetime prevalence of cannabis-use disorders have been indicated as nearly 5%. And I keep telling you guys this, I keep talking about it. This doesn't have any effect on me whatsoever, except for my grandson. But you guys are going to have to, you're the ones that are going to have to deal with this. You've got Colorado to your north. New Mexico tried to legalize marijuana in the last election. So did Arizona. So you're the ones that are going to have to deal with this. I've already messed with this over the last 40 years. It wasn't nearly as bad. Well, yes, it was. In the 70s, it was worse than it is today. But they're legalizing marijuana all around you. So what is going to happen next? I have no clue. But you guys are going to have to deal with it. I'm too old. I'm not going to have to mess with this marijuana stuff anymore.
I heard they're trying to legalize it on the inhalation.
Didn't they vote last year? They voted it down?
Against it.
All right, let's see what happens. Well, won't that be perfect? All your high school kids will be, smart. Exactly. If you've ever been around somebody that smokes pot, they think that they know everything. They don't know jack, but they think they know everything. It's so much fun. Maybe they'll start saying something other than dude. There's increasing interest in the connection between cannabis use in adolescence and the development of schizophrenia. One of the things we know is that if you have a proclivity for schizophrenia, you smoke pot, then you drift into schizophrenia. Same way with amphetamines, but it's the same way with pot. And this is one of the things that we've noticed. It's a hallucinogen. And how do people with schizophrenia react? They have hallucinations and delusions. So the probability of this taking place is very, very, very high. We're not exactly sure if there is a causal effect, but it looks like there is. So that's just something that you need to remember. You guys don't remember cocaine like I remember cocaine, mainly because I was working in the emergency room in the 1980s when this stuff was really, really popular. It wasn't just popular, it was popular with rich people. And for that reason, we got individuals that were the mayor of the city, the whole council would come in with this kind of stuff. It wasn't so bad that they were high. That wasn't so bad. What was really bad was the fact that they were impregnating their wives. Their wives are snorting cocaine, and now we've got a baby with this problem. Really, really kind of sad. Cocaine's been around for a really, really long time. The Inca used to use it in South America before pre-Columbian. Pre-Columbian, they used cocaine. It's been around for a really, really long time. Became very popular in the middle 19th century. They started using it as a stimulant. They even put it in Coca-Cola. It was in Coca-Cola. The truth is, it's still in Coca-Cola, but not the stimulant. The stuff that's in Coca-Cola is the flavoring, Coca flavoring. So if you drink a Coke and then you drink a Pepsi and you go, the Coke has a different flavor in it. Well, the different flavor is the cocaine, or the cocaine extract is actually what it is. Like I said, it has no stimulant in it. There is a stimulant in Coca-Cola, and that is caffeine. And of course, we get caffeine from coffee. They changed it in 1903. Coca-Cola was invented in like 1889 or something. So for 14 years they had cocaine in there. 1903, its medical usage has waxed and waned since then, and it still is found in select diet pills. So it's still out there somewhere. Today, more than 21 million people have tried the drug, and about 1.8 million people are using it currently. An estimated 3% of the population will become dependent on it in the U.S. at some point in their lives. Is that all just 3%? That's not so bad. Cocaine brings about a euphoric rush of well-being and confidence when used. With a high enough dose, the rush can be almost orgasmic. And of course, as I said before, this has been used as a aphrodisiac. 420. It's time. It is time. Okay. Anyway, I'm not going to talk any more about orgasms. No, I got to stop right here. It's almost orgasmic. It's not quite orgasmic, but anyway.